This video is the first of a series devoted to astronomy to relearn all fundamental discoveries. They are the foundation of our knowledge. Without this knowledge, we are unable to understanding whether the Earth is flat. We learn at school. The origin of the constellations. As far back as time goes, there are civilizations that have sought to understand the motion of the sun, the moon, the stars and the planets. Behind the understanding of their movement there was a tremendous way to orient themselves in space and time. However, we had no idea what the stars could be. The first astronomers tried to find their way by imagining shapes in the arrangement of the stars. Thus, for example, Babylonian tablets dating back more than 3,000 years have been found mentioning the constellation of Capricorn. The Babylonian clay tablet opposite dates from about 1100 BC and is one of the oldest known astronomical readings. According to the texts that were found, the Egyptians, around 3500 BC, had identified the 12 constellations of the zodiac, and in China there were 28 lunar houses. In the 2nd century, Claude Ptolemy had identified 48. Today the number of constellations is set at 88. An example with the representation of one of the most famous constellations of all, the Great Bear. The observation of the stars made it possible to identify in time. Egyptian farmers realized that at some point in the year, the appearance of the Sirius star just before sunrise indicated the beginning of the flood of the Nile. In Rome, the same phenomenon indicated the beginning of summer heat and often drought. Sirius belonged, and still belongs, to the constellation of the Big Dog Canis Major, and this star was also called the Little Dog or Canicula. The elders were convinced that this cursed star was closely linked to summer droughts. This is how we got the word canicule in French, still used today. How does the sky work? Okay, the stars are fixed relative to each other. They also move during the night and each evening. At the same time, we find them slightly shifted compared to the previous night. The Babylonians had observed around the year 1000 BC that the stars returned to the same position after 360 days and invented the circle of 360 degrees that we still use today. But we will devote in a future video a little time to the history of the calendar. The stars must all belong to a great sphere that revolved around the Earth. It was the most logical explanation. However, certain luminous points did not exactly turn in harmony with the stars. There were 5 that were named planets, from the Latin planeta, which means to err. It was also understood that these planets were not all located on the same sphere because they did not all move at the same speed. In fact, modeling was very simple and very logical. The more the planet is located on a nearby sphere and the faster it turns. 2 of them never moved away from the Sun. So they had to be between the Earth and the Sun and turn almost at the same speed as the Sun. This theory was put in place by Aristotle and improved by Ptolemy in the model above. So everything went for the best in the best of possible worlds. However, several phenomena did not stick in this theory, and everyone knew. There was the retrograde movement of Mars that we could not explain. There was also the change in brightness of Mars, which was a mystery. Finally, if Venus and Mercury turned at the same speed as the Sun, they should have been motionless in relation to him, but that was not the case. The headache of the retrograde movement of Mars. For a time, every 780 days, the planet Mars moves in the sky, then turns around before resuming normal walking. During its half-turn, its brightness increases. If Mars turns well around the Earth, it should not make this bizarre movement. This problem occupied the astronomers for nearly 1,400 years. And for 1,400 years, the model of Ptolemy was used, adapted, with smaller circles, to try to explain this damn retrograde movement of Mars. The epicycles, which were supposed to explain everything, were then invented. According to this theory, the planets, in addition to turning around the Earth, described small circles in their orbit. Epicycles. We will develop the epicycles in a next video, but it is important to know that thanks to the epicycles practically everything was explained. On his epicycle, Mars moved closer and moved away from the Earth, resulting in a change in brightness. When the movement of Mars on its epicycle was the opposite of its speed of revolution, the planet retreated, thus explaining the retrograde movement. As Venus and Mercury were always aligned between the Sun and the Earth, their movements from the Sun were only due to the epicycle, hence the fact that they never moved away from the Sun. Such an Earth-Mercury-Venus-Sun alignment still seemed a bit far-fetched, but it was the only possible explanation, and therefore necessarily the right one. In addition, the theory of epicycles was in phase with the fundamental and religious concepts of the time. Man has a privileged place in the universe. The Earth is at the center of the universe, the circle being a perfect figure. To explain the universe created by God by circles was logical. And meanwhile the shadows were pumping. Obviously, there was no simple solution because the only explanation that kept the road was that the planets and the Earth simply rotated around the Sun, and there, everything was lit up. But how to prove it? It would be necessary to find a phenomenon, which geocentrism could not explain, even by adding new epicycles, and which would naturally be explained by heliocentrism. Astronomy was about to take another step, but that's another story. The conclusion of this first part is that in order to understand the functioning of the solar system and the universe, one had already to have an idea of what constitutes them, the size of objects, stars, planets, the Sun, and the explanation of their movements, to start with the closest to us, Earth. This is what we will see in the next parts, redoing one by one the demonstrations and observations of the time that made it possible to understand the universe. We will therefore forget all that we know and put ourselves in the shoes of an astronomer of 2,500 years ago who knew nothing and wanted to answer all these questions. What is the size of the Earth? As the chapters progress, we will be able to answer these questions more or less reliably. We shall therefore resume after each of the chapters the list of these questions with the answers we have been able to provide. Before we start our journey, we are going to review a very complicated story of something very simple in appearance, because we rub shoulders with it and manipulate it every day. Yet it has required hundreds of years of adjustment thanks to observation of the phenomena which surround us. Its outcome is linked to our knowledge of astronomy. You guessed. This is the calendar. Of course, we will approach this chapter first because time has always fascinated our ancestors, and you will soon see that without a good notion of time it is absolutely impossible to calculate the distances of the objects of the universe. Thank you for watching this video. Do not hesitate to subscribe, I tell you. See you soon for new discoveries of astronomy.